Hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Bhagyashri and I would be the host for today's exciting event. I would firstly like to thank you all for taking the time out to attend this interactive learning power hour session hosted by Harbinger. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a series of interactive roundtable discussions amongst the industry stalwarts where they would be sharing their experiences and insights on the particular topic. So the topic for today's discussion would be building competitive advantage by leveraging product OEM strategies, which is brought to you by Scheme Through at Harbinger. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping tips. In case you cannot hear the audio, ensure you are selecting the right speaker for audio output. You may test the same to see if it's working fine from the audio setting options on the lower left corner on your screen. If necessary, dial in using phone. With that, now it's a time for an introduction. Our host for today's roundtable is Shrikant Patidil. Shrikant is president at Harbinger. His innovations in formulating sound technical approaches to business problems are consistently appreciated by customers. His solutions have ranged from development frameworks, data architectures, schema designs to test strategies for applications for thin client, rich client, and desktop. Shrikant is also our go-to person for the latest know-how on shifting technology paradigms. We welcome you, Shrikant, and over to you.
Thanks, Bhagyashri, for the introduction. I hope my audio is coming through okay. Cool. So, yeah, welcome everyone to this roundtable discussion on product OEM strategies. Today, we are going to discuss how OEMs can help you build a competitive advantage. And to do that at more depth and share more insights, we have a great panel with us today. And I will introduce them briefly in a few minutes. Before that, let me give you a quick overview of today's session. What's the general flow and what are the things that we are going to discuss? Today's session, we try to focus on the key market drivers for OEM strategy. We will talk about the various approaches one may take while doing OEMs and how it could be a win-win strategy for all the stakeholders involved in an OEM initiative. OEM being a vast topic, we won't cover some things like what are the legal aspects one needs to look at when it comes to OEM, or this whole emerging marketplace concept about how you license and build software and put it into a marketplace. Also, our main focus is around software and software aspects of OEM approaches and success parameters. It's not going to touch anything about hardware because OEM probably as a concept came in through hardware to start with, but our focus of discussion is primarily on the software side. And for the sake of the flow, we have divided our discussion into three segments, starting with talking about why OEMs are necessary, what is the importance of OEMs in the market and how it helps different players. Then we talk about the various types of OEMs that one gets to see, and based on where you are, how you can choose one or the other. And lastly, we will also talk about the main challenges people face and how to build a checklist so that when you do an OEM initiative, how do you make sure that you come out successful? So that's how we have organized it. So let's get started. Before we talk about the market insights, one thing that we thought may be a good idea for the audience is how to give an understanding of what are the players involved in an OEM space. At a very high level, I think there are two important key players. One is the platform company, which is providing an end-to-end solution or multiple workflows or a complete package to an end user. and they are the ones who are selling the service that an end user consumes. And secondly, there is so this could be, as an example, it could be a CRM or a HR platform, if you will. Now, an OEM technology provider mostly talks about a specific feature or a specific workflow. They don't do the entire module in most cases. And examples of this would be a payment processing within a large platform, or maybe an analytics platform within a large system, and so forth. To maybe contextualize a little bit from an Harbinger perspective, one example that I would want to share here is Bhagyashree talked about our skim through product. Now, the skim through product by itself, what it does, it allows you to skim through videos. Like if you have a video and you're wanting to navigate through it very quickly, it helps you kind of do that through its AI powered engine. Now, however, it's more beneficial if it's put in context of a large platform that is delivering a lot of training videos, or it's a collaboration platform or a video interviewing platform. When it's embedded there, then it can work on a large set of videos and therefore reach out to that many more users. From a platform company's perspective, it helps them build that competitive advantage or have that unique feature of navigating videos quickly, which otherwise it would have taken it a long time to build, or may not be something core that they would have want to invest in the short term. But integrating with skim through or OEM skim through gives them that advantage. So hopefully these examples have given you some idea of the concept of OEM and the players involved. And this is a good time to talk about, what are the market drivers? The three most important market drivers, according to us, based on the research and the work that we have done in the recent past, is that the main thing is the go-to market, or the time to build a new feature. For a large platform, this could take a long time, and therefore to stay competitive, they are looking for options where they can embed something that is ready-made, or embed that something that they want to test the market with. They don't want to build themselves first. So that is one option. Second thing, as users of existing platforms, they are continuously challenging the platform company to come up with new features, new workflows, new scenarios, and the OEM channel kind of helps them kind of deliver to that need quickly. And last but not least, when a platform is trying to sell to new markets or new set of users, every time there's a complex buyer ecosystem that is there, and to cater to everybody, it becomes necessary to have all the bells and whistles in your product, and therefore OEM could play that advantage. So hopefully I've given you enough to set the background of our discussion today and why it's important. This is a good time for me to kind of dive in and welcome our panelists for today, because I'm sure we'd be interested to hear their views on the overall product OEM strategy. So today we have with us Eric Shepard, Executive Director, Talent Transformation, Josh Medina, Senior Account Executive from Workato, and Lloyd Fassett, HR Tech Consultant and Labor Market Entrepreneur. So welcome all of you. Thank you for being on the panel today. Eric, starting with you, if you could introduce yourself and share your views on this topic.
My pleasure, and thank you, Shrikant, for inviting me to join your forum today. I sincerely appreciate it. To give you some introduction, as you might be able to tell from my accent, I was born and raised in the UK. I now live in Miami in the US. And as you might also be able to tell from my gray beard, that I've been around a while. So I joined the computer industry in the late 70s. I worked for various computer companies and then started my own ventures way back in the 80s. And in that period, from that period to today, I have built development teams, managed development teams, run companies, started companies, sold companies, etc. And a key part of success is knowing when you have the core competency to achieve a mission, or when you need to partner with another group. So I think that's the reason you invited me, and I'm looking forward to making contributions.
Thanks, Eric. We'll look forward to your views, and I'm sure your advice and your experience will be great for the audience. Moving on to Josh, you'd like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant, and appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for the invite to be part of this. And so my name is Josh Medina. I am an account executive at Workato. We're a leading enterprise automation platform, really the only iPaaS that's recognized by analysts for OEM, what we call our embedded solution. Career-wise, I actually entered the workforce right when the economy was going down around 2008. Always been in some sort of IT software sales capacity in different industries, whether it was in financial services or even intelligent transportation, but really found my knack in integrations and automations for the past several years. Specifically embedded OEMs. So obviously why I was invited here today. And I've seen different approaches, and so excited to share my perspective. At Workato, really we work closely with product managers, engineering leaders, a lot of different stakeholders, really driving an OEM or embedded type strategy. And so I think a lot of that is really focused on helping my partners get to their goals, time to market, achieve the user experience that they're looking for. So a lot of this aligns in the discussion today. Excited to share my perspective. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And I think Workato's focus and your focus probably is going to be pretty interesting of how you see the perspective of some of the points that we are going to discuss. Lloyd, moving to you.
Shrikant, thank you for also having me on the call today. I am in Bend, Oregon, and I started my career in the late 90s in San Francisco. So I was a part of the first .com rush, and fairly proud of it, because coming out of school from before that, having learned some other basics, I think this topic is coming forward because as the world becomes more and more digitized, the emphasis on what strategies business take is slightly shifting. So my particular interest is that I think this conversation before the internet was about organizing your business horizontally or vertically. And now that emphasis has become, or the opportunities are expanding significantly in favor of becoming more horizontal. I also have a deeper experience in labor marketplaces. I've got about 20 years in HR talent acquisition technologies and processes. And within that world, standards are emerging and have been emerging for 5-10 years. And that's a part of this whole conversation about how standards influence strategies and how customers are served better, more and more so by companies collaborating with each other. So it's really fascinating from a technology and strategy point of view, and comes down to serving your customers better.
Thanks, Lloyd, for sharing your perspective on this topic. And I'm sure your consulting experience and working with many product companies will definitely give us some useful tips on how to approach an OEM strategy. So moving on, let's go into the next part of our discussion, which is about the various types of product OEMs. Now, based on the work that we have done over the last 15-20 years, we have seen that in software, there are 4 types broadly that are there when it comes to OEMs. One is you are trying to OEM the software at a source code level. The other approach is you're kind of building a component and you're trying to OEM that as a component within a large ecosystem. The third kind of a solution is where you have a comprehensive solution. Maybe it's one workflow, multiple workflows it caters to, but you're almost having like a service and a solution. And the fourth thing that is emerging, and we may not get time too much to spend on it, so the whole marketplace concept. So when you are trying to sell or attract a certain community of users towards your product, so therefore embedding that software in that community or that marketplace makes it more interesting for you. So based on this classification, we have seen that mostly the developer community or people who are building software that targets developers, they focus more on the startup kind of. They focus more on the source code type of licensing, whereas startups and mid-sized company more focus on component base, and the mid to large platforms focus on the solution sort of an OEM approach. And of course, there's the community side, which focus on completely depending on that marketplace and the community for licensing their software. Some examples here, mostly developers come up with frameworks. This could be low code, no code frameworks. This could be JavaScript frameworks for accomplishing something. So those are generally the toolkits and solutions that you see in that segment. Skim through, we talked about a few couple of slides before. That's a good example of a component-based license where the product is not evolved like a big solution in itself. It's smaller, and therefore it's kind of it's more embedded like an AI engine into a platform. Of course, some mid-sized companies also might think like Workato might fit in there, and Workato also fits into a large platform which enables the OEMs. So it's also one, and there are many other examples of large solutions which look at themselves as an OEM sort of a platform. And when it comes to community, it's more like a Salesforce kind of a model, and then various developers or software companies trying to build features using the Salesforce platform and putting their solution and selling there. Now, one more important aspect is how do you brand when it comes to these different approaches. In the component and the source level approach, we see that mostly it's white label. They don't really want to project their brand in such a big way, and that's because it works better from that perspective. Not that they're not brand conscious, but mostly these approaches lend better to white label solutions. Whereas in a large platform or a mid-sized platform, and that you're trying to OEM, or in a community situation, in most cases it is co-branded. That means brands of both the companies, the platform company and the OEM provider, is equally and visibly visible to the end customer. So this is the types and approach and the classification that we have. And at this point, maybe I can go back to our panelists and ask them some questions about their thoughts on this classification, what they think about this whole thing. So my specific question, starting with Josh, I think since with Workato and your experience, you've worked a lot in the OEM space. Specifically, if it's a mid-sized company, what type of approach? And in the classification, we kind of put mid-sized company in various buckets. I mean, they are kind of seen in multiple. They are branded, they're white labeled, both sides. So, what's your thought process in terms of what approach they should take and why?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think it's important to share. I work with all types of companies, and you're right, it is relative in terms of size. So in terms of small to enterprise, B2B SaaS companies is who I primarily work with. So we're definitely familiar with a lot of the challenges that mid-stage companies experience. I think first and foremost, my advice for those thinking about an ODM strategy and how to approach it is really having a strategy in place, right? I work with many different types of prospective partners, and some are just doing research. Some actually have a strategy in place. Some have actually had their fingers burnt with other providers. And so I think the ones that actually get the most out of it and can be more efficient and find value quicker, even in just early conversations and kind of vetting out the right partner, is just having that strategy in place and then being able to bring that strategy to a prospective OEM, vendor or partner to see if there's alignment versus trying to align with what that vendor offers and just trying to set expectations of where there is alignment with that vision. So having key requirements, your use cases dialed up, knowing what that desired user experience is that you're looking for. Also consideration for edge use cases, right? I think the one thing to always, I try to set expectations, there's not a silver bullet out there, right? So understanding where the limitations are and what those edge cases are, and can you approach them together, and thinking about more roadmap alignment, how that evolves, can you evolve together? And then obviously commercial alignment is just as important as all the technical aspects. And so I think just having that in place, setting expectations is a key thing, and then approaching it strategically. Whether it's a component and it's just some little widget you want to put in your product, or it's something that is a complete integration experience that you want to take to your customers, approach it strategically, because if you don't, it's going to be handled, it's going to be handled not. It's just going to be a little widget that, maybe just one person cares about. But if you have executive sponsorship, from the top down, and you treat it that way and give it the love and support that all these things require, it's not a transactional type of relationship. And so there's really always more feature requests than there are engineers. And so, an OEM approach can allow product managers and engineering to outsource key capabilities. And sometimes it is better to build versus buy, and other times it's better to partner. And so I think that's where, if you're vetting out partners, the folks that are telling you that it's all rainbows, that's not true, right? It's about, having a partner that's going to be real with you, set expectations, is going to be someone that you can rely on down the line to continue to set those expectations and guide you as a trusted advisor. So that's my initial thought there.
Yeah, just that makes a lot of sense in terms of, because you work with a lot of different size companies, and having that executive sponsorship and approach, and not thinking about it as a one-time small thing, really helps. Like it's more like a continuous exercise. Lloyd, your perspective on the different approaches, and what should mid-size companies shoot for?
Yeah, I would reflect some of what Josh said, with that there is no silver bullet. Of course, there's no silver bullet, but trying to get to the higher level of like, well, so what should we look for? I think it's super fascinating that this is the first question, and it's about mid-sized companies, because the first thing you mentioned, like one of the basics, is speed. And if you think of a mid-sized company like a small battleship trying to compete with the large battleships, of course, you're looking to do things that are more nimble and faster, and you're trying to find that way of satisfying your customer in a way that battleship either doesn't see or is too small of a market for them. But at that mid-sized level, OEM can be more of a game changer with digital technologies, because of the ability to integrate faster, to have somebody else bring in that new piece of that feature, rather than doing it yourself because you're constrained. But also the business relationships that you can strike, where if you're doing a revenue share of some type, it becomes, the barrier to integration becomes a bit easier if you're not having to exchange money up front. If you're doing it on the back end, there's still other things to consider. But yeah, I'd say the market, the customer, and being able to bring in the right feature quickly are things that should resonate more with mid-size enterprise companies, or mid-size platforms. So that's, at a higher level of the initial things that I would look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. The whole speed aspect and ability of not having enough funds to do everything um, should make them choose between one or two of the approaches. So that makes sense. Eric, your perspective on this? You have done this plenty of times. So what's
Well,
your?
firstly, I completely agree with Josh and Lloyd, and the alignment with strategy. I mean, if you know where you're going, every decision becomes so much easier. And if any connection with actions that you do is connected to the strategy, it gets much better buy-in support. And without executive buy-in support, you'll sense resistance that you'll be constantly firefighting against. So those 2 points are very well taken. I think the other thing for a mid-sized company, you're constantly bumping into opportunities. And so having a partner where you can say, this fits into our strategy. Here's a client that wants us to add this module or enhance a module. It's easier to say yes to if you've got an OEM partner. So as a for instance, there was one time where we had some software that emulated an HP printer, and we needed software to emulate a PostScript printer. And it was much better just to go and buy in some specialized talent to do that. We made a huge mistake. First of all, we got the specs lined up, everything was ready to go. We went to a low-cost provider that didn't particularly have the right expertise. And this thing took about 24 hours to render one page of PostScript. And then we realized, yeah, when you deal with someone who's got some talent in the specific areas or experience in the specific areas, you don't have to make all the micro decisions. You're working with a partner that understands that. To the other points I think have already been raised is that this time to market, it's very easy for an executive to say, well, we'll just get 2 developers and a product manager, we'll put this together. But actually getting the expertise, I mean, that case was a PostScript example. You need the expertise not only to be developers, but in the domain, so you don't have to explain every micro user story. That there's some kind of momentum going into the project. And then with all this buy-in and alignment, knowing what you're doing and working with a partner that's got this domain expertise, you can really scale up and work more quickly. The other, bring to market quickly. The other thing that is often forgotten, and I have been at various levels. I spent 20 years as a CEO of a software company. So the other thing is the maintenance aspect. It's really easy to get in, 2 developers, a coffee lady, a tea lady, and a dog, and say, fine, let's build this module. But then you find, the dog leaves, the coffee lady leaves, and maybe the developers leave, and you get stuck. But
Yeah.
if you're working with a specialist organization, they then have got elasticity in that team that you can leverage on when you bring in a OEM partner.
That's wonderful examples and how you should which approach to take and your own perspective about what worked for you and what didn't. So moving on further, let's talk about a follow-up question on this, and I think some of you may have been in this decision-making process that, okay, you select an OEM partner or an OEM approach, and you make that as a core part of your strategy. So what is it that you are looking for when you're looking for an OEM? Is it like a core feature that you want to build, or is it like a bright shiny object for your sales team that you want to enable to get that competitive advantage, or it's a backend feature, or it's a combination? What exactly, from your experience, you've seen works most in most cases, and what would be your advice to the audience, whether they are an OEM provider or a platform? What is it that they should uh, look for? Starting with Lloyd, you want to go first on this?
Uh, yeah, I think the main thing that, I mean, no silver bullet, right? But the one thing that I would prioritize most is your goal on who owns the customer relationship. Because if you're going to be the platform, I think a part of your role is to be a partner to help navigate the options that are available in terms of the vendors that you can bring into the platform. So it's strategically important that you're the front you're the front end, and that can be digitally rendered, or that could be through your personal relationships in the real world, particularly with enterprise sales. I liked Eric's example of the printer, developing a driver for that in-house, because I had something similar happen when I was with Wells Fargo in their online financial services group, and they had decided that they want to offer online payments to their online customers, and they burned through some $5 million trying to develop that internally, and ultimately figured out that they couldn't execute on it, and went with a vendor who, of course, is not co-branded in this situation. It's just if you go to actually that provider has dominated the space for bank payments now. So pretty much wherever you bank and you go to the online payments group, you're going out to an OEM provider who's doing the work, and they're not co-branded. Yet that I think the reason that has come through the whole industry that way is because of ownership of that relationship, which is the bank. The bank has a brand. They're reinforcing the relationship with their customers, and now they're offering multiple features in that relationship. Yeah, among the longer conversation, I would just chip in about focusing on who's going to own the customer relationship, in terms of selecting your OEM as driving what OEM approach you take.
Sorry, I was on mute.
A
Look
classic.
around. I thought,
You're
what,
on
no one
mute.
hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. I heard you.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, going back and forth with mute is always a challenge at times. No matter how much you practice, you still miss it. So so yeah, I think a great point, Lloyd, about who owns the relationship should be one of the key decision makers into what goes into selection on what you build or for what you exactly OEM. Eric, your perspective based on your experience.
So one thing I would say is that context is king. So it's difficult to say this is the approach, but so what I'd like to do is recommend a tool of coming up with the approach. So I generally think about these things. Are you going to build it? Are you going to buy it? Are you going to work with an OEM partner? And to Lloyd's point, absolutely, who owns a customer is critical. Who's managing those relationships critical. But what I tend to do in cases like this is I'll turn to a spreadsheet. I'll have 4 columns. The first column is going to say the criteria by which I'm going to judge this decision. So time to market, costs, maintenance costs, and kind of split it out, and then say, okay, if I'm going to build this, what is going to be my speed to market? What is going to be my maintenance costs? How am I going to do product management? If I'm going to buy in a module, how am I going to do it? If I'm going to work with an OEM partner, and that spreadsheet kind of helps teasing out ideas. And as you go through your executive team to get the executive buy-in, you're going to hear their fears and concerns, or their excitement, and you can build that also into lines of the spreadsheet. After a while, you'll find you can group them together, etc. It makes for a much more logical and less painful decision-making process because you know why. And I think that's one issue here, Shrikant, is saying, why are we making this decision? So it's easier to defend downstream. There's always bumps in the road. And when you hit the bump in the road, it's like, relax, everyone, calm down. We made this decision for all the right reasons. We've met this bump in the road. Let's huddle, let's solve it. Let's work as a team and work together. So that's my suggestion here is use some tools to tease out why you're making it, get clarity and get buy-in using that clarity.
Makes a lot of sense, Eric. The context that you of making that decision, and also following and doing it a little bit rigorously through a spreadsheet, and then taking all the key stakeholders along with you and catering to their objections makes a lot of sense. If people approach that decision making, then 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, when you're revisiting that, you know on why you made that decision. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Josh, your perspective on this question?
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with both those points, right? I think going back, having a plan in place, having a strategy and vision is always helpful than, having a low level intern create the plan and all of a sudden fighting upstream and then try to present a business case. We should do this. I see this problem. That happens, don't get me wrong, but I do see it go a lot more swimmingly when you have that plan in place, like you're saying. And then back what Lloyd was saying was, who owns this? And it's not just who owns that relationship, because that's just one person, right? Who owns the delivery? Who owns the support? Who owns, there's so many other, so who are all the key stakeholders? I think we're gonna talk about that here a little bit, but I just wanted to echo some of that. So from my perspective, I've seen a lot of different types of decision criteria in helping ISVs and how they approach it. Some great, some not so great. Some are trying to, move real quick, and there's things that are missed. And so obviously the technology and meeting your requirements is important. But that's only the start of really good relationship, right? And so an OEM relationship. And so, I appreciate that the opportunity at Workato, this is not a transactional, and nor should anybody view OEM as a transactional type of relationship or sales cycle. I'm allowed to take my time, during the cycle, understand different business objectives, what the vision is, the strategy in the market. You're trying to compete with others, you're trying to catch up with others. What's your revenue goals? How is this going to impact, right? What's the business case to it? If we do this, how is this going to impact your business? Are you going to get more deals? Are you going to, drive a new revenue stream, or is it just table stakes for the market that you're in? Obviously, how does it align with product strategy? Are there feature functionalities you have to build to then be the bridge potentially to this OEM solution? UX, right? So important, customer experience. And really then when we work with, partners and prospective evaluators, have a plan in place, right? If it needs to be some sort of collaboration and you start getting the feel for a partnership in this early discussion stage, I should say. So then tailoring, what does technical validation look like? Does this meet my business? So it's not just a shiny object, but put it to the test. And I'm all about, understanding those requirements. And I benefit from having a very enterprise leading platform in Workato that we lead with our product first. And so happy to address those, set expectations, here's our limitations, let's knock out these use cases to make sure it all works. And in parallel, obviously go through different things like security, but also commercial alignment, right? So how are you going to market? Are you selling this product, or does it need to blend in with your margins? And so having a partner that's flexible to adjust commercials to your go-to-market is very important. So, just not taking that transactional or quick route, treating it strategic, like you were saying. And, I see some folks as not necessarily the shiny object as a feature functionality, but more so like the cheapest price. Time and time again, I see folks being just wanted to go for the cheapest option. And then they end up paying 3-4x later because that didn't work out, or that partner wasn't around. I think that's another aspect of it, is the long-term viability of the partner you're looking at. Are they just a niche player, or are they a leader in the space, right? Are they going to be around? Are they going to be acquired in a few years? And what happens to your relationship after that happens? Are you left holding the bag? I've seen that time and time again. And then even going back to just like the support, right? So, we live in a day where there's lots of new companies popping up, lots of different career opportunities. I think, Eric, back to your example, is some folks leave. What happens with the support model? Just thinking through, the worst case situations and obviously the best case situations is, okay, how's this partner gonna be here for me when the person that actually drove this initiative for this partnership leaves the business? How do we all get trained up? How do we maintain that relationship? How do we continue that support so that our customers don't experience a negative impact or even know, that folks have changed? So, that's my perspective. Obviously can share more on different criteria as we go on.
Sure. Thanks, Josh, for giving the view of not not thinking about it from a transactional perspective, but from a strategic perspective. I think that's very valuable when you're making OEM decisions. Moving to the next part and the third part of our discussion as to what it takes to build a successful OEM partnership. Now that we've taken a look at all the types, the big challenge is in getting OEMs to work is it can be quite a complex undertaking on both parties. It may look very simple that you just have to make two softwares work together, but it could be quite a complex undertaking where one needs to look at things from roadmap to integrations to customizations to pricing model to support and even all the non-functional parameters that come in. So it could be a big project or a big initiative in itself. Just to give you an example, a few years back, we were kind of OEMing one of our standards compliant player with a learning management platform. And at that time, there were multiple standards that we needed to support, and we supported two of the industry leading standards. The third one we didn't support. For the LMS, for this learning management system company, it was very important that the third standard was supported and supported before the go live actually happened. Now, it wasn't spec'd out in the relationship document. And because it was not a core feature for us, it was not planned in the immediate roadmap. And though there was enough time, there was 6 months probably for this whole integrations to take place, it was kind of figured out at the very last moment that this was an important part that was an expectation, and it was missed out. And it was assumed that, this would be there, whereas the other party was like, well, this is not important for us. We never put a date on this. So of course, it created a lot of heartburn for both the sales teams and, reworking of dates and so forth. Therefore, I mean, even a very simple thing, which is futuristic, is very important for both parties to be transparent and clear about and have a joint understanding. So it's not easy, and therefore one needs to have a comprehensive checklist. And these are some of the parameters that we have identified based on our experience, where you need to dig deeper and make sure that there is a common understanding between both parties. At this point of time, I'm sure our panelists have a lot of views on this. And one of the things maybe I would start asking Eric is that there are multiple stakeholders in an OEM partnership, and who better to tell us about it than you? So what's your take on how they should come together, or what constitutes a successful relationship?
By the way, Shrikant, you've assembled a great team. I love listening to Josh and Lloyd and you. You bring great perspectives. Thank you for educating me about some stuff. You mentioned, as you talked through the previous slide, relationships, and I just wanted to talk to that for a moment, because we have to acknowledge in any relationship there's going to be bumps in the road, and there will be a missed requirement, and there will be something, where everybody's going to work in good faith to try and do the right thing. But having at the beginning of the relationship conversations to make sure that people get to know each other. One of the first rules of negotiation is to know the people. And so as a consumer of OEM services, a provider of OEM services, to spend time on developing those relationships, I think is key. And then when a problem turns up, there's more likelihood for people to say, both of us should have got this, we didn't get it, let's work together to resolve it. And in psychological terms, it's very easy to blame the outsider and praise the insider. And you've got to make sure that the outsider becomes the insider. So those relationships are kind of key. When you've developed that shared understanding during the negotiation process, during the onboarding process, it's much easier to negotiate ways that things like roadmaps can be explained. And it goes back to some earlier comments around the business model. When we work with salespeople, we'll understand that everything had to happen yesterday or the world is going to end. But actually, when we start talking to the customer, they say, well, we can't implement this for a while because we have other projects, but we just want this roadmapped in. And the more trustable your roadmaps are, the more your customer, the end user customer, can start planning and rolling this into phases. Now, there are times when it's crisis and urgent, but I would say, get to know the people, work out the best roadmap format that makes sense, and keep it updated with regular conversations, both between the platform company and their partner and the platform company and their clients.
Makes sense, Eric. I think that those are good insights and good thoughts of how one should approach this complex project and how to become successful. And the whole relationship part is kind of key there, and listening both internal and external, so that voice.
Just one other thought, Shrikant, is there are great tools out there to but my colleagues will probably talk about those as well.
Sure. Yeah, moving on to Josh, your views on this topic of multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it goes both ways. A lot of times I think in sales, you'll hear sales leaders, you got to be multi-threaded, right? In your perspective, prospect and their organization. And I think the same should be for evaluators, right? You should want to be aligned with the executive of the company you're trying to buy from. Going back to what Eric, you were saying is, if you have relationships, it makes difficult conversations easier to have, right? How do you iterate? How do you partner? How do you collaborate to get yourself out of a sticky situation? Or even further, right? How do you accelerate success and get creative? How do you help each other out in other ways, maybe even beyond your actual commercial relationship? And so I think executive alignment is always key when applicable and when it makes sense. And of course, it depends on what the solution is. In my world, it's typically product engineering, C-level from that aspect, and then maybe even customer success, depending on who's using the solution. And obviously, I think a lot of that, the stakeholder, identifying who the right stakeholders are really then predicated on, your defined strategy, right? What are the business drivers? Is this helping sales? Is it something that's helping, take the bandwidth off of the engineering team, and, you have a lot of technical debt. So depending on the solution, it really dictates who the right stakeholders are. And then also going back to, it's not just like a widget, it's a strategy, right? It's a strategic thing. So, who are these stakeholders? Make sure they're involved and bring their input. And even during a partnership and when it's already executed, bringing expertise from your perspective. I work with ISVs and companies in all segments, and I cannot be an expert in everything. What we are experts in is integration and automation, and do have maybe similar type of customers, but ultimately it's very important, I think, for a partner to bring their expertise, set expectations what they're looking for, and then align with our folks to help them achieve that vision. I think one thing that we bring to the table at Workato, which is actually pretty valuable, that I haven't been able to leverage other companies, is really go-to-market support. So we're talking about the stakeholders, is also, how are you taking this product to market, right? This is a strategic thing you're going to take to market, put it in front of your customers. Is it something that we can work together, support you in joint marketing, webinars, things like that? How do we grow together? And so all of a sudden you start having multiple stakeholders from across your business that start caring about this, instead of it being just kind of siloed. So that's kind of my perspective, and being multi-threaded and the value from it for both sides of a partnership.
That's pretty good, Josh. I think the multi-threaded approach also, what Workato as a platform enables two ISVs to come together in unique ways, and they take off a lot of the load and help you in the go-to-market and planning strategy. So I think that's quite unique, and I think I'm sure people will benefit by leveraging Workato in their OEM kind of initiatives. So thank you for sharing that. Lloyd, your perspective on the multiple stakeholders?
Yeah, so reflecting on what Josh and Eric said, I'll end up mimicking a lot of that and hopefully amplifying it. But one of the questions that came to mind for me was, how much time of the CEO do you want this feature or OEM relationship to take up? And that helps me to gauge who the right stakeholder is. I mean, is this like for the Wells Fargo or the banking industry bill payment feature? That takes up no time of the CEO of the financial services company. It's just not that important. This is just an add-on table stakes, right? And that can be fine for that provider. It's a good business, and it's their sub industry. But Josh started mentioning go to market, and I think that's where these opportunities and where OEM is becoming more important is that if your OEM is bringing revenue to the table, that's a different discussion. If this is going to open up a new market, that's a different discussion. It's exciting if someone's going to provide a feature and says, "Oh, I also have a couple customers that are interested that we could bring into the fold for you," and then hopefully we'll get 10 or 20 more. How big is this market? So digitally, the reason software becomes so much more exciting is because of the speed at which we can rev and learn and fail and then keep feeling the market for what's out there. This gets into what Eric was saying with your stakeholders bringing the outside inside. I think Eric and I go back enough years where there's a lot of people, probably the customers too, and Josh included, that there's a bit of a change in business culture now where there was a much more strict relationship between your vendors and your customers. Things were much more defined, whereas I think it's emerging more, I like the word collaboration, right? And roadmap is a really key thing on your chart that you had shown. And my first thought is, oh no, I'm not going to tell people my roadmap. That's my strategic imperative. But the flip side of that becomes, well, if you're being told that, if you put this feature on the roadmap by the person who owns the customer relationship, that ends up becoming a really important input into your roadmap, and that's more of a collaborative relationship. I really like, Eric, how you said bringing the outside in, because I'm feeling the same thing, that it's moving slowly in enterprise software, but it is changing and evolving how we relate to vendors, and that changes the stakeholders and how you operate with them.
Makes sense, Lloyd, about your perspective about how the stakeholders and the key business perspective of your strategy is important in which stakeholder gets involved in the whole process. So thank you, all three of you, for sharing those important views.
And I wonder whether I could just share one more thing. It reminds me of a project where we had to embed a mathematics editor into our product. And there was a leading player that was kind of arrogant, and there was a very small player, but had really good ideas about how to take this thing forward. And we invested in sponsorship into that company, and they ended up with a world-class product and actually ended up acquiring the previous market leader. Wow. So I mentioned that because it talks to Lloyd's point about sometimes you need to worry about competitors, sometimes you don't. In this case, even though my competitors were going to benefit from my sponsorship of a feature, it was not going to undermine my secret sauce. It wasn't going to undermine my marketplace, but it was going to give me a little bit of an edge sooner rather than later. I could go into the technicalities of it, but that doesn't really matter. The change, I think, in the marketplace is saying, sometimes I will sponsor development and it might benefit a competitor. However, the benefit it brings to me is so much more it's my secret sauce. It's my recipe that is going to win in the market. This other peripheral thing is just part of the recipe, if that makes sense.
That's a very interesting perspective that you as a platform company had a vision for a startup or a small company, and kind of went, though it would have helped your competitors, you still went ahead and did that.
Absolutely.
And
In
it
fact, we
eventually,
encouraged our competitors to do it, Shrikant, because then we had pooled resource sponsoring this key feature. And so we wouldn't have had to carry the whole burden, which is the whole concept of OEM relationships. You're not going to have to carry all the burden as you would have to in a straight outsourced relationship.
makes sense. Perfect. Thank you for elaborating on that, Eric, with that example. Appreciate that. Moving further to kind of a last question here on this topic. And I think Josh's perspective may be kind of interesting here. When it comes to selecting OEM technology, if you want to do integrations and customization scalably, what do you need to do? Josh, any tips on that to start with?
Yeah, for sure. I think scalable integration could factor into many different things, from technical, whether we're thinking about infrastructure, horizontal and vertical, or as well as also thinking about the commercials. How does that scale as well? And so I guess from my perspective, in helping other partners that are ISVs and B2B, how do they scale that across customers? So a lot of times, for example, you see, I run into issues or challenges that folks have and say, yeah, it takes us 2 months to build a new integration with a new developer, and then onboard a new customer, it takes us another, month or whatever. And so I think just having the partner in mind that can help you shorten those challenges from a time to market is one of the key components you mentioned earlier. And, with Workato, it's awesome because I have a great answer for that, and it can prove it out in the sense of being able to propagate, different integrations, automations, spin up new customers very quickly. So from a scale perspective, that technology is there. And then obviously as well, from an infrastructure perspective, we bring that as well. And then going back, we touched on it from a go-to-market perspective. How do you align, have some sort of a commercial model that makes sense and then scales and thinks out, from the most successful type of relationship as well as not, and just having, I guess, a clear set expectation of the commercials and how they scale from that perspective. So I'll stop there because I know we're running short of time. I want to give the other gentlemen some time to speak.
Sure, Josh, thank you. And I know, Workato plays an important role in the whole OEM situation, and how it helps, you develop scalable integrations and customizations across 2 platforms and manage it very well and deploy it. So yeah, I'm sure from an audience perspective, they should look at the platform to see how it helps in their overall OEM strategy. Lloyd, your perspective on integrations and customizations from an OEM perspective?
So yeah, I'll give a quick instructive story and a glimpse at what I think's coming. But I know Eric has done a bunch of work with standards, and I like the story that he just told about encouraging the ecosystem to standardize around a vendor. In my world, or my experience of financial services, there was Quicken and MS Money, and they worked together to deliver a standard on financial data exchange. So and that's old integration. That's whole, there's a lot of flavors of XML. So that's at the data level of exchange that enables some interoperability. If you want to do a more rich integration, it's a bit of a different discussion, and you get into what could be 2-directional flows of information. That's super fascinating, because I think a lot of the frame that we're talking about today is I'm going to build a functionality and I'm going to deliver it over here and it's going to stay over there. But now there's opportunities where you can get feedback, particularly for AI and ML, right, about interactions, and that can then, consolidate a better ML engine because of aggregation of data out at the actual customer front end. It's another perspective, and I know we're running short on time, but I think the Semantic Web, I'm a big fan of that, and it's basically an extension beyond XML. It's the next thing where you define a vocabulary and a particular term is a node, and you can connect to that node in multiple ways. That becomes a really fascinating way of exchanging data, as well as functionality and the processing of that data. So no silver bullet there, but yeah, there's exciting times. My closing remarks would be to do it. do OEM. Things are changing and moving faster. It's going to be a more important arrow in your strategic quiver, you know, going forward.
Thanks, Lloyd, for sharing that perspective and also sharing the importance of standards. So I'm sure all of us are, looking forward to the industry to come up with standards and people who are involved in those initiatives like you and Eric as well. So, Eric, your quick perspective.
Very quick. Endorse standards before you start trying to develop something proprietary. Look at what the standards are out there. And see how you can use them. And I'll leave it at that because I know we're short of time.
Yes. I know.
Shrikant, I would love to add one last thing.
Ahead.
Just thinking of it, I was thinking of one thing I think that is important when you're evaluating OEM vendors is thinking about the flexibility and extensibility, because there's always going to be limitations, but ultimately there's a lot of value in being able to own and control, extend said platform for meet you use cases and things like that, to some of those aspects that Lloyd was talking about. So just thinking about customizations, they're always needed. There's always customers that need them. So how do you solve for that? I think is a consideration. I'm just wanted to leave everyone with.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I know we've just got started on this topic. On the checklist, we just touched about 2 points, and there are 7 or 8. So as we dig deeper, there are more things to discuss. But great insights from all of you, and I'm sure it probably gives us a segue to do more deeper discussions on maybe key aspects of OEM. So just to before we move to the final segment and hand over to Bhagyashree, I just want to summarize that what we accomplished today. One is we talked about the market trends that are promoting OEMs in the industry. We talked about the different types of OEM approaches and what you can take and how you probably can define yourself as based on where you are. And finally, we also talked about the important things of how various stakeholders need to come together, what kind of checklists you can create, and to what level of depth you can go, like touching upon standards to integration platforms and so forth. So I'm sure there is many more things to discuss, but hopefully this gave you an idea of considering an OEM strategy for building a competitive advantage, whether you're a platform vendor or you're a technology provider. So let me give the last couple of minutes to Bhagyashree to help us close this, and maybe if we have some time, we'll take one or two questions. Over to you, Bhagyashree.
Thanks, Shrikant, Eric, Josh, Lloyd for this insightful discussion. This webinar was hosted by SkimThrough AI from Harbinger Group. SkimThrough helps you to hit the high spots in videos quickly, and therefore you can save a lot of time in the process. By leveraging SkimThrough technologies for videos in your platform, you can drive better user engagement, improve learners' recall value, and deliver more insightful analytics. SkimThrough AI has APIs for bulk processing of your videos, and it integrates with Zoom and other collaboration platforms. It can work with training, recruitment, marketing, and management videos. To know more, please reach out to us. With that, I know we have very less time, but I would like to take a couple of questions, Shrikant, which we have. Our audience have asked us a question. So the first question is, if there is a failure in an OEM relationship, what are risks involved in both the parties? Shrikant,
Eric, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think one of the risks is you don't get buy-in internally, and a small bump in the road is seen to be a mountain rather than a molehill. So most risks with professional organizations having authentic conversations, you can minimize and mitigate those risks.
Yeah, that's well put, Eric.
Great. The next question is, what percentage of investment on OEM partnership should expect to invest in go-to-market? For example, like 20% of overall investment in the relationship. So is the percent more or less floating your product on your own or partnering with OEM partner? Yeah, so the question
If I
is
could
the
jump in there,
percentage. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
yeah, just jump in. I think it's so contextual. So if you're selling a $1 million license fee per year, and you just need that one thing, and it's only going to cost you 10,000, but it's going to pivot your $1 million. That's one context. Or the other context is you're going to be losing important customers unless you invest in this particular way. So the question is one indicating that it's just cost driven, and I think it's more than just cost. It's expertise, it's time to market, it's what happens downstream. So that comes down to the relationship things. So it isn't just about cost; it's about multiple factors that you need to evaluate. And I think it's not possible to just come up with a percentage.
Great.
I would like to
Yeah,
answer
Lloyd,
that.
great.
I'd like to say the same thing in different words, which
Yeah,
is you
it's
should
always
accelerate.
good.
You should accelerate your investment as you're seeing traction, right? I like Derek's framing of it, but yeah, there's no reason to say I'm going to spend 20% unless that would be an outlier. It's possible if things are very well defined, but for the most part, yeah, integrate. There's enough reason to see if it's going to work, and as it works, put more fuel on that fire.
Yeah, I guess just to add my perspective on the same vein, I think it depends on the business outcome that you're going for and the ROI that you're going for. And so it's supposed to be mutually, a mutual thing in this partnership. So both sides should be investing in it the same, and then just aligning on it. But it's all relative, right? Depending on what type of solution it is. So I think that those points are well said by Lloyd and Eric.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for sharing your perspective on this question. I'm sure there would be more, but maybe we can send it to you over email, and then we can post it as a link later.
Thank you, Shrikant and panelists, for this wonderful discussion. I'm sure we all are going back with some food for thoughts today. I would like to thank our viewers for joining this session through Zoom and LinkedIn. You have been an amazing audience. In the meanwhile, if anyone from the audience would like to have more questions or would you like to reach to us or our panelists, feel free to drop us a line at hsinfo@harbingergroup.com. Thank you once again. Take care and have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks, Bhagyashree. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.